Hi, my name is Riz Reyes and I'm a horticulturist in Seattle, Washington, and I'm the gardens manager here at McMenamins Anderson School in Bothell. So I've been asked to teach you guys deciduous plant ID, and I'm going to show you around the grounds here and show you some of the more common but also some of the more unusual plants that you can find in the landscape. So why don't you join me? So we're going to start at the very top alphabetically in terms of families. So the first family that we're going to discuss is Actinidiaceae, which is a family of the kiwis. Alright, so this is Actinidia deliciosa, the most common member of Actinidiaceae, and it's the fuzzy kiwi, just starting to emerge. So fuzzy, as you can tell, with the dense pubescence there. And of course, being dioecious, you need both the male and female in order to produce fruit. So pretty easy to identify. Here's the less common, but probably easier to grow maybe, is Actinidia arguta, which is the hardy kiwi. So again, both male and female are needed to produce fruit. And big difference, no pubescence, and occasionally the red petioles kind of give it away, and also just the shape of the leaf too. It's finely acuminate at the tip, lightly serrated, and in a few months this whole arbor will just be covered in foliage and hopefully fruit. We're here on the east side of the hotel to talk about the next family on our list, and that's Adoxaceae, which includes this shrub here. This is Sambucus, better known as elderberry, and this is a selection called Lemon Lace, I believe. Beautiful golden foliage, and the bronzy new growth is quite attractive. What's interesting about Sambucus as an ornamental in the landscape is you can actually coppice this pretty close to the ground and have it come up again. So it's a way to sort of control its size. It also control the shape of the shrub. And you can see where we made a pretty high pruning cut. That's where new growth will emerge. But you can actually cut it way back close to the ground. You can see the previous year's cuts to control its size and also control its shape and habit in the landscape. Probably the most prominent genus in Adoxaceae is the Viburnum. And there's both evergreen and deciduous species, but Viburnum's pretty easy to recognize in the landscape, again because of its opposite leaves. But Viburnum is also known for its inflorescence. So what you're looking at here is a classic umbel. So think umbel, think umbrella in terms of its shape, and pretty much all Viburnum have this type of inflorescence, so they're pretty easy to recognize. Alright, I think no one's around now, so I decided to get rid of the mask so you could hopefully hear me and understand me a little bit better. So let's continue on. Probably the most recognizable of the deciduous viburnums is Viburnum plicatum. And Viburnum plicatum variety tomentosum is probably the most recognizable, and it's known as the double file viburnum. And it gets that name because if you look closely at the leaf arrangement, again, opposite, which is a diagnostic trait that we look for in Adoxaceae. So the opposite leaf arrangement, but if you look at the branching pattern, this horizontal arrangement bears its flowers that are born in basically two rows that will form flowers all the way down. So this is obviously a young plant, and it's more prominent in larger specimens, but you can see at the beginning here the double row, what should be a double row of inflorescences. Again, the classic umbel is very evident in this particular example here. Oh my gosh, I need a weed. So much like Viburnum plicatum variety tomentosum, the foliage sometimes gives these plants away. So like in plicatum, you can see the deeply impressed veins that are quite prominent. Now this particular selection, this is Viburnum exponentens. It's a cultivar called Dawn, and it's probably one of the more popular winter blooming shrubs. So obviously it's spring now, so it's fully leafed out, but in winter you have clusters of umbels of pink flowers that are quite fragrant and quite lovely actually. So when it's not in bloom, when it's in bloom it's pretty obvious what it is, but when it's not in bloom you might confuse it with plicatum, but as you can see the leaf arrangement is the same, it's opposite as you can see, but the habit is quite different because there we have that horizontal plane where you'll have the double file of flowers, whereas here it's a little more kind of rangy in its habit, and it's not as distinct in its habit. And of course the bloom time is quite different, where plicatum of course is in bloom now in early May, and as I said, Viburnum exponentens Dawn is a winter blooming shrub. Alright, so we're here in our parking lot to talk about the next family on the list, which is Altingiaceae, and this is the genus Liquidambar. This is Liquidambar Liquidambar styracifloa, also better known as the sweet gum. Now you might look at this and think, oh, it looks like a maple, but one characteristic that will differentiate it from the maple is leaf arrangement. So maples, which we'll get into when we talk about the family Sapindaceae, maples have opposite leaf arrangement. And here you can clearly see, we have alternate leaf arrangement. So sweet gums are pretty prominent in the landscape. I wish I could show you the fruit. It's turned brown now. Normally they'll be green, and sometimes they make a mess. They're kind of fuzzy green balls basically once they develop, and the tree's usually covered in them when they drop to the ground. But what makes Liquidambar or sweet gum so valuable in the landscape is its incredible fall color. And this is a selection that's actually a dwarf or shorter growing form, I should say, so it's more to scale when using it in the landscape, but it has a beautiful texture, and really the highlight is in the fall when this turns a brilliant orange red, and it's quite striking actually. Alright, so our next family is Anacardiaceae. Just kidding. Anacardiaceae is the next family, and this includes the Cotinus or smoke bush. Right, so springtime isn't really the best time to look at Cotinus or smoke bush, but you can start seeing it here leaf out, and it has this kind of glow to it when it first comes out. So this is the purple smoke bush, and it is a shrub that can get quite large, but it's one of the few shrubs that we can also coppice. So I'll show you an example. Alright, so Cotinus tends to have a kind of rangy growth habit. It's not super attractive. So, sorry, I have a mask on. Okay. So we chop it down in late winter, early spring, pretty close to the ground. And as you can see, it's starting to leaf out. So this does several things. One, it keeps the size in check. It makes it much tidier, but it also produces much larger leaves. So it's a bolder texture, and we lose the smoke because it won't really flower, but you have more bold foliage. And when it's backlit, it's so pretty. the next member of Anacardiaceae that I want to show you is the Sumac. This is Rhus typhina, and it is very similar to the Sambucus that we looked at. Very similar, if not identical, texture and color, but again, to differentiate the two, it's the leaf arrangement. So this one's going to be alternate versus the elderberry or Sambucus. It's going to be opposite. So Rhus is pretty easy to identify, especially when it leaves out or starting to leaf out. The base of the trunk or the stems tend to be kind of bare, but then it gets quite full eventually. But Sumac is also notorious for being a spreader. So we have it there, and a little bit more. We have it there. And go a little bit further, we have it there. So, you've been warned. It's still a really, really pretty plant though. I mean, this is a selection called Tiger Eyes. And it's wonderful in a container, so you can keep it in a pot. But you need to keep it in check if you're going to use it in the garden. Now, we're on the west side of the property here, where we have Ceanothus in full bloom. And we're going to talk about the next family, which is a pretty diverse one, and that's the Birchidaceae. So, the barberries. This is Birchidaceae Birchi, and as you'll see, very similar to the Catinus in the Anacardiaceae. This is another shrub that is coppiceable. I don't know if that's even a word, but well, it is. I made it up. Ha. So, in an attempt to keep the size in check, and in doing so, you can see a much, much larger foliage than this typically has. So, note the spines that it produces, and also it'll produce yellow flowers that are quite distinct actually, and I'll show you an example later on. But this is a very diverse family, as I said, and this is probably the main I guess member that you'll encounter of the deciduous members of this family. So this is Birchidaceae Birchi, a coppiced form. So here's one that we didn't coppice. Sorry. God, I'm very behind in my weeding, forgive me. Okay, so we actually did coppice this, but here we can actually see its flowers. So if you look closely, they're quite unique. They're lightly scented. Ooh, not very pleasantly, but you can see it also has a very interesting leaf arrangement, and I am blanking on the term, but notice the varying sizes of foliage that it develops. If you turn it over, you can see the alternate leaf arrangement of the leaves and also the axillary flowers. Kind of pretty. So berberis tends to be a plant that people will plant to, add color, but in all honesty, it's so overused. It's actually invasive in some parts of the country. I think in the East Coast, it's actually banned. Sorry, I'm still reading. But here it's not a problem. It's not invasive, but it's so common. But people like to plant it when they have neighbors that they're not quite fond of, because again, we saw those thorns earlier, and here you can see them in the developing stems. But when used properly and it combined with other plants, it's a very effective, very easy landscape plant to utilize. So to be more creative in how we use berberis or the barberries. So, but here it's kind of pretty with the soft texture of the grasses in the background, and of course the bolder foliage that contrasts with it nicely. So there it is. One of my favorite members of this family, Corniceae, is the genus Cornice. So these to us are flowering shrubs, or flowering trees, I should say, and then the shrubs. Of course, the red twig dogwood is in this group. So here we're looking at a variegated selection. It's actually one of my favorite landscape plants. It's a variegated form of red twig dogwood, and it's a selection called Hedgerow's Gold. So it's not a cultivar that you're responsible for, but this is a selection of Cornice sericea. And you have, I believe, 3 that's on your list. But oh my god, it's so pretty. Beautiful backlit, just brightens up this shady section of our gardens here. So it's interesting because it's selected for variegation, but it also is quite variable in its variegation, in that sometimes you'll have a golden pure yellow form, and sometimes they'll propagate this separately and call it sunshine. But it's an exquisite plant, very easy to grow. And let's see, you've got Viburnum, which is the yellow twig dogwood. You have Kelsey, which is the short growing one. But they're all adaptable landscape plants, and of course native to us here in the Pacific Northwest. So a lot of variegated selections, or selections in general, but also very useful in the landscape. And this is another plant too. We didn't do it here, but this is another one that you can coppice, and to actually get thinner and also brighter colored stems in the winter. So I'll show you one cultivar that is well known for that. So this is Cornice Midwinter Fire, and as you can see, it's leafed out, actually budded and about to flower, but it's not really known for its leaves or flowers. It's primarily the stems. As you can see there, they're a bright yellow orange, sometimes red, and it gets its name for its bright winter stems. So this one we did not cut back down to the ground and coppice completely. We'll alternate whenever we do that. So it'll be a larger plant, not as bright as stems perhaps, but still architectural. So the key to using this plant is having good companions with it, because as you can see, it kind of, it's a nice texture, but it kind of gets lost. It's also similar in terms of color and texture. You need something with it so it actually stands out or pops, or use it as an architectural element where other plants can use it as either a background or have something grow even right through it. For example, I've grown herbaceous and even vining clematis through Midwinter Fire during the summer season, and so you can use it that way. But the highlight, of course, is the winter stems for sure. Alright, now we have the family Betulaceae, which includes Betula, which are the birches. So we don't have many birches on the property, unfortunately, and well, there's one, but we just planted it and there's not much to see right now. But anyway, this is actually a beautiful member of this family. This is the contorted hazelnut, Corylus avellana contorta. It's a purple leaf form called red dragon, and as you can see, contorted, really beautiful, unique textural foliage, and also its branches. We've actually got one in a pot that I want to show you. So here we've used that same cultivar but in a large container, so we can really accentuate the stems and the emerging foliage. It's beautiful backlit. So even by itself it's striking, but we'll probably plant something else underneath for textural and color contrast. But so even if it were winter, you'd have something unique to look at. Our next family is Capra Foley Ac, and the first on our list is Colquitzia amabilis, also known as the beauty bush, and it's kind of pretty, hence its name. So actually it's a very common shrub that is sort of nondescript the rest of the year when it's not in bloom, but it tends to have, and also a lot of members of Capra Foley Ac actually tend to have this very arching vase-like shape. to their growth habit. Leaf arrangement, let's make sure we have that clear, and it is clearly opposite. And again, look for that pubescence in the inflorescence. That'll always be there to help you identify it. Alright, here's another member of Capra Foley Ac. This is the Himalayan honeysuckle, and in summer these will be covered in red bract inflorescences with white flowers, and it's kind of a weedy plant, to be honest. It does self-seed itself, as you can see. but fairly distinct lobed edges and serrated leaves there, and also look for hollow stems. There's also a golden leaf form of Lycisteria formosana, and there's several cultivars of it, but golden lanterns is a very common one. So quite nice, and it does actually seed around still, but not as aggressively as the typical green form. So it's kind of nice to brighten up a bright, shady spot. And of course, not in bloom right now, and also the leaves aren't as dissected or lobed. See, they're more entire on this particular selection. But like Capra Foley Ac, look for the opposite leaf arrangement, and for this genus also, the green stems also give this plant away, and of course they'll be hollow as well. Alright, oops. Need to fix that irrigation head there. You can see that the SAMs basically swallowed it up, so I need to clear that so we get water going. But we have an oddball family here. So this is Celastraceae, and it is the family in which the genus Euonymus belongs to. So there are plenty of evergreen Euonymus that you're familiar with, and this is one that's deciduous. This is Euonymus alatus, and I believe compactus is the selection that you're responsible for, but this is the burning bush. So it gets that name because come fall, this whole thing looks like it's on fire, basically. It's a vibrant, bright red, you can't miss it. But it's also a very highly overused shrub, can get quite large. This is actually the straight species. You can see how massive it can get. The compactus tends to be a little bit smaller, but very useful in the landscape because it's drought tolerant, easy to grow, easy to propagate, all that jazz. But here we can see various diagnostic traits. The leaf arrangement is opposite, and you can see the flowers here, which most people don't really pay attention to, but it's really the foliage and the compound leaf that you'll see here. But another characteristic, if you look closely at the branches, you will see these bridges. There we go. See these protrusions there? That's a very key trait to look for in Euonymus alatus. You know, it is kind of pretty, as overused as it is, but again, look, it's like massive. So we actually pruned this a bit, believe it or not, but obviously we didn't prune hard enough. So in a way, if you are going to use this in the landscape, you should be using compactus. Right, our next family is Cornice, which includes Cornice, or the dogwoods. This is Cornice florida, and there's several Cornice on your list that you'll be covering, but this one fairly common, but it has all the diagnostic traits that we look for in this particular genus. So one unique thing that you might not know to help identify Cornice is its ability to basically do this. Notice these fine little strings there. It's a type of latex that this tree is capable of producing. So if you're ever questioning the identity of a leaf, like, oh, it could be Cornice, it will do that to the leaf. But anyway, of course the flowers stand up. Technically, what you think of and see as flowers are actually bracts, or modified leaves. So in spring you'll see these in full bloom. So you'll have Florida, which is this species blooming now, and then later in the season you'll have others that will flower. That'll be Kusa, which again, flowers will be very similar but a little bit different. There are hybrids between the two species, but if you're trying to differentiate the two species in general, Florida will be the first to flower, or to bract, I should say, and then Kusa. And then of course it's hybrids anywhere in between. So you can actually have flowering dogwoods blooming from spring into summer. So the family is I can't even, I just knew I was going to butcher that. Cerciphilidaceae. Is that close? Alright, close enough. And the genus Cercidophilum. So it's a great name because it describes the plant perfectly. Cerce is like circle, round. Phylum is leaf. So round leaves all along the stem here. This is Cercidophilum japonicum, and it's a selection called Rots something. Anyway, it is red. So it's a purple or red form of the species. So you'll occasionally see it. Of course, the green form is more common, but of course we like things unique and special here, so we don't have the green form, we have the bushy purple one. Anyway, notice how we've used it up against the wall here so we can really admire its textural foliage. But it's a plant that is actually one of my favorites in the landscape, even the green form of it. Nice texture. The leaf arrangement, it varies actually, so it's hard to distinguish. Sometimes it's opposite, and here it's obviously alternate, but it's the circular leaves to look for. And also later in the season, close to fall actually, it has beautiful fall color, but it emits this wonderful kind of sugary cotton candy like scent that you'll recognize. So yeah. Okay, being the geek that I am, I want to clarify something. So I'm actually not at the Anderson School, but my former garden actually, which has been kind of left abandoned. But near our property, we have Cornice nuttallii. So you can see the bracts have formed, and the center there, of course, is quite different. You can see the leaves are very similar, and because Florida and nuttallii often will bloom at the same time, it's very easy to confuse the two. But I want to show you some diagnostic traits, and also I'm going to actually pick this and compare it to a Florida that I actually have. So I'm gonna trespass on my own former garden and compare the two species. So nuttallii, of course, is our native, and as you can see, it's quite tall, and they vary in habit. So they tend to be airier, much taller, and more informal, whereas Florida, because it's in the landscape, tends to be more shaped and manicured, because people prune it and stuff. So here it's a little more kind of wild looking. But also another thing with nuttallii, you'll notice, particularly later in the season, you don't show it now as the leaves here are fairly healthy, is the anthracnose that this particular species is quite known for. So let's look at Florida again and compare the two species. Oh, well, while we're here, I found a betula. So Betulaceae, this is Betula jackmontii, which is the Himalayan birch, and had 3 of them here flanking what once was a path. But again, beautiful, beautiful tree. It can get quite large, but very distinct, and having that beautiful papery white bark on its trunk makes it very attractive. Let's look at the foliage. And the key thing to identifying your birches is the foliage, actually. If I can get this to focus. They do vary in shape, so it'll be a good idea to compare the different species of betula and their leaf shapes. So that'll help. So if you don't get a chance to see the entire plant, the foliage will help you out. Okay, so this is a very, very old and overgrown Cornice Florida. As you can see, it's just starting to leaf out, but up above, this one is pink. And if I can reach, see if we can bring one down to compare. There we go. So obviously this is a pink form. So let's compare the two. Okay, now I've got both species in my hand here, so now we can compare the two. So here's Cornice nutalii, our native Pacific dogwood. So again, a little bit rough around the edges, informal, kind of a roundish, more rounder leaf, and again, very wild. And of course you saw the growth habit of it. Versus Florida, again, not the most attractive specimen. This is why you need to keep up with your pruning, folks. Again, this particular one has pink bracts, but if you look at the developing foliage, notice how it's a little bit more refined, a little more elliptic in its leaf shape, and the tip is a little bit more acuminate, so it comes to a point. And also the veins are quite prominent. Veins here too are quite prominent as well, but they're not as impressed as you will see in Florida. And Kusa will also have more similar foliage to Florida as well, so you can compare the two. But the main difference between Florida and Kusa, which we'll hopefully see later on, is bloom time. So Florida will be blooming now at around the same time that nutalii will be blooming, and then Kusa will come later. So while we're here, let's talk about one of the Cornice that you have on your list. So this is one of the red twig dogwoods, as you can see. This is Cornice elegantissima is the selection. So it's the white variegated red twig dogwood. So you can see it here, again, unpruned, and will respond well to coppicing, but this is what it looks like when kind of just left to its own devices. So it's a beautiful, hardy plant, and again, our native, so well adapted to our region, and just lights up an area very well. So, but yeah, it just needs to be pruned and coppiced. So, but it's a good plant. So just wanted to show you what that looks like. The typical, more common green form of Cercidophyllum japonicum. So there it is. So circular leaves held horizontally on the horizontal branches there. The leaf arrangement again can be variable. This one is quite opposite, as you can see, and it's pretty distinct. So what you're looking at right now, from a distance, you can pretty much identify the Katsura or the Cercidophyllum. Okay, I have to show you really quick. Okay, I know this is a disaster since it's never really been cared for, but look how potentially cool this would have been if this Catinus had, gotten a little bit of pruning and tidying as it's leafing out. With that Ceanothus, those two colors together could have been just so stunning. Oh my gosh, I mean, look at that. Like, I think I kind of knew what I was doing, but it's one of those things that, of course, I didn't plan for, but now I'm thinking, oh, those two plants really will have worked together. So yeah, just thought I'd point that out.